What's up, duels? I'm Smashton or SmashtonYGO, and we need to talk about this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and all of these guys. So, Yugioh, from my understanding right now, is in a Tier 0 format. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a Tier 0 format is essentially a format in which a single deck makes up a certain percentage of tops. I believe it's usually like 60% or more, something like that. You can correct me down in the comment section below, but like a really high percentage of the topping or winning decks are a singular deck. And from my understanding, Snake Eyes is one of those that we're in right now. And that's kind of triggered me to create this video. It's kind of got me to think about modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently and the past formats we've had, and how I'm a little worried about how our formats, we've seen a lot more tier zeros or things that are very close to a tier 0 a lot more often than I'd like right now. So I'm going to be completely honest here right now. I haven't been playing a lot of modern, like, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently. Haven't been to locals in a while. I've been kind of out of the competitive scene, so I don't know all of the ins and outs, right? I know some of the decks that are out there. I kind of vaguely understand what they do, the one-card starters and stuff like that, but I haven't been really into the paper card game for a little bit, and that's mostly because of light stuff and everything like that. But the main reason why I say that is because, you know, I don't know all the ins and outs right now. I'm kind of getting back into it again, but just to preface this, when I talk about like Snake Eyes, that I'm no expert, right? But what I did do is I played a lot of cashier format, I played a lot of tournament format, and everything sort of in between there I played a good bit of. And what I have kind of learned, or at least noticed recently, is that since about 1.5 years ago, since I started playing paper, we've kind of been in some pretty high power formats. Now, I am not somebody who tends to play high meta decks or the top meta decks. First of all, they're just kind of out of my price range. That's not really something that I can afford in the first place. Second of all, I just kind of don't find it super interesting. Not because I'm sort of like a, oh, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Is bad, or like, you know, anti-meta snob or whatever. But more so, I just have other decks that I kind of prefer. Like, if Salamangreat, one of the decks that I really enjoy, if it became tier 1, or like, not even tier 1, but like tier 0, or like the most powerful threat, then I would still probably play it just because I really like the deck, I like its aesthetic, and I like what it does. But generally, the decks that I tend to play aren't really on that level, right? I didn't start playing Sword Soul until it had well been past its prime. I played Gold Pride Punk when it was kind of at its height, but it was never really that kind of top strategy. I played Dinos, which has been always like kind of good, but never like a top meta threat, except for like Dino Rabbit back in the day. So they're just generally not the kind of decks I play, and so I don't have a lot of experience with how it feels to be in those situations, but I do know how it feels to play against those decks and to be involved in that situation and to play a lot of them online. And I gotta say, most of the time, it's not a great experience. Now, there's a debate always in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Community about tier 0 formats or low deck formats versus high deck variety formats. Formats that have a bunch of different decks that are viable, versus formats that only a few decks are really the top viable decks, or the tier 0s where only one deck is really viable. Whether you prefer one or the other, it's not really a big deal. The main thing that I kind of want to talk about here is that we have seen a lot more of the small amount of decks being powerful, those formats, versus the one where there is a lot more wider variety. And I think that's sort of a trend that we're seeing over the past couple years from Konami with Yu-Gi-Oh! And not just with, like, you know, the formats themselves and how powerful decks are going, but with the cost as well. Unfortunately, with tier 0 decks, just the nature that they are, they're gonna be expensive because Konami knows what they're doing, and they're printing those cards in extremely high rarities, to the point where guys like me who don't make a fortune, have other hobbies, do other things that cost money, that they can't sink every single penny into Yu-Gi-Oh!, just simply can't afford them. When Tier Limit was first like kind of getting really going in tier 0 and I was starting to play for real, that was an example where I couldn't play tier limit. I could probably play it now because everything's banned and things are cheaper. But when tier limit first came out, it was like, if you're not playing tier limit, like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? You're not going to win. Like, sure, maybe you could eke out a win here and there. And I'm sure in the comment section below, you're already typing, oh, well, I won this turn. I won this locals. I did da 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 da. We all know tier limit was one of, if not the most powerful deck Yu-Gi-Oh's ever made, period. Right? If you weren't playing tier limit, you were at an automatic disadvantage. Now, the same can kind of be said for the format after with Kashtira, not to the same degree by any means. Tier limit was obviously way higher, and I don't know what the real statistics were. Correct me in the comment section below, but I don't know if Kashtira, except for like a weekend here and there, ever really got to that tier 0 status. But what I do know is that it was a very, very highly competitive deck. It was a deck that was clearly far and away the best deck in its format, and it was pretty dang close to a tier 0 deck. Now you come now to Snake Eyes, where it is, again, a clear tier 0 deck, and this is a lot of tier 0, or like a lot of formats where only a single deck is super viable, right? It's kind of insane. And again, this has been a growing trend with Konami and Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently. Printing cards, printing decks that are new, immediately amazing, immediately makes people go buy them, immediately makes people spend their money, immediately makes the market go up, and then you wipe them all out in a couple months. You kind of have a reset period where in a couple months, there's maybe a few more decks that are more viable, and then boom, another one singular new deck strategy comes out. Super highly competitive, best deck in the format, or one of the 2 best decks in the format, and it's super expensive, right? This keeps happening time and time and time and time again, and I think it's really hurting the game, and it's really tiring. And it's sort of maybe part of the reason why I haven't played as much recently, because I'm just, right now, I'm not that interested in playing a tier 0 format. I'm not that interested in feeling like I'm at a constant disadvantage right from the start, right? Even less so with Kashtira, because Kashtira, when I played that, it was more so that the decks that I was playing kind of lost to Kashtira because of banished cards. But Kashtira was kind of bricky, right? And it was easy to beat them if they bricked, right? Or if you had something in your deck that could specifically counter, right? If you put a token or gave your opponent a monster or something, like, they basically couldn't play for the most part, right? But it was still clearly like the best deck. You were going to see Kashtira. If you went to a tournament, you were going to see Kashtira. If you went to locals, you were going to see Kashtira. And it was, you know, well known that Kashtira was the most powerful deck in the format. And you were going to have to spend up money if you want to get Kashtira. You're going to have to get those 3 fingers. You're going to have to get that Arise Heart, etc., etc. And we're kind of just seeing that again, except now with Bonfire, now with the Snake Eye cards, Diabell Star. That's just getting more expensive, man. And people can't afford this stuff, especially, you know, how things are now. People can't afford to be buying this kind of stuff, but Konami keeps doing it, and it's dwindling player numbers. It's dwindling, maybe not dwindling player numbers. I don't want to get flamed in the comments for saying like, oh, well, tournaments are at, you know, peak records, but it's dwindling the amount of new players that could come in. Imagine you're a new player, right? Imagine you're somebody who's never played Yu-Gi-Oh before, you're interested in the game, and you're like, okay, I want to jump in, see what's going on. You go to a tournament, and you're like, hey guys, I want to try this out. You know, I brought this, you know, I've bought a structure deck or whatever. I'm coming here, I'm sitting down, and they throw Snake Eyes at you, and you are just destroyed. Just destroyed. It's not a great feeling. And I know you could say that and argue that about any competitive, like, experienced player versus a newbie, but I think the difference is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier 0 formats can feel so oppressive when that happens. And even if that person who's coming into the card shop is like me, right, who is somebody who is more experienced, does know how Yu-Gi-Oh! Works, does have that kind of like understanding, I walk into that card shop and I walk up with my deck or whatever. Maybe I get some wins here and there, but I know I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have Snake Eye. I know I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have SP Low Knight. I know I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have Thrust. I know I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have the cards that are out of my price range that will not allow me to battle at the same level as somebody else, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Should be a contest of skill, not a contest of cash, right? And that's kind of where I always stand on it. And I think tier 0 formats really just lock a lot of the player base out because either A, they don't like the lack of variety, B, they find it boring, or C, they don't have the money to participate. And that's a whole host of people who could be participating in your card game, who could be participating in tournaments and showing up to events and buying your product, who are no longer going to be doing that, at least for a couple months, because they are one of those people who just likes to play whatever's competitive at the time. And this is kind of a ramble video. It's kind of just stuff coming from the heart. It's just something I've been noticing recently where I feel like we've had 3 very distinct formats in quick succession where the top deck was either a tier 0 deck or pretty damn near close to it. And I think that's a little bit alarming, especially if you think back to some of the formats past. Like historically, our tier 0 formats have not been that frequent. Like we've had a good couple of them, but I don't know if I can recall any tier 0 formats that were this frequent outside of maybe like you had Dragon Rulers that got bumped up right next to Spellbook. But it was kind of weird because Spellbook was kind of like an answer to Dragon Rulers in a way, so it was different. But I don't know. That's what I'm kind of at, where I'm like a little worried about the state of Yu-Gi-Oh right now. If, you know, 6 months down the line, 7 months down the line, all of a sudden we're in another tier 0 format and we just keep getting these tier 0 formats, I think they've got to go because, again, they're not fun for people to play. They lock a lot of people out of the format, and I'm just a little worried that it's happening a lot. It's happening a good bit now, and it's something that's got to change, I think. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm overblowing it? Do you think that we actually haven't had that many tier 0 formats, or you're not super worried about it, or that the decks are beatable, or maybe I just need to get good, Scrub? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on all that I've said in this video and on your thoughts of tier 0 formats and what your favorite kind of format in Yu-Gi-Oh is. Do you prefer tier 0 formats? Do you prefer low power formats? What do you prefer? Let me know in the comment section below. Let's have our conversation. If you like this kind of video, hit subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.